all higher education institutions to consider flexible learning environments, but not to really require higher education institutions to go fully online. This is due to the varied levels of internet connectivity among the higher education institutions in the country. Nonetheless, educators have been busy in recent months preparing digital packs. Some call it digital packs, others refer to it as online learning modules. And so at this point, we have already planned our online learning modules. So I think it's about time for us to consider when the classes open in August 24 or 25, and in higher education institutions also sometime in early September, we will be implementing these online learning modules that we have designed. And so while we're implementing it, these ideas that I will share with you this morning might help you in evaluating the effectiveness of the online learning modules that you have created. Okay, so for this talk, I will center on 4 important issues. I will start with a definition of online learning modules so that we will be on the same plane and that we will be on the same wavelength, so to speak. And then this will be followed by my discussion on the different quality standards that you can use as benchmark when you evaluate your online learning modules, and the universal design for learning principles, which is the framework that we used or we have used in the design of our online learning modules. And then I'll proceed to discussing the action research process and why it is necessary to use action research as a paradigm for evaluating the online learning modules. And I will continue with discussion of how online learning modules can be evaluated following the Plan, Do, Study, Act model. So let me just remind you about the 5 pillars of quality online education. These 5 pillars serve as building blocks that provide support for successful online learning. If you want to know more about this, you can visit their website, www.onlinelearningconsortium.org. And the 5 pillars of quality online education are learning effectiveness, faculty satisfaction, student satisfaction, scale, and access. Let me just briefly define each of these pillars. So quality online education is dependent on the effectiveness of the learning that has taken place when online education is used. So as one educator said, if we cannot ensure optimum learning among our students through the online education materials that we have created, then everything goes down to drain. The second pillar from this slide is faculty satisfaction. Online education and the preparation of materials for online teaching must empower the teacher. So there is some degree of satisfaction that the faculty has to experience, to empower her to continue creating online modules and other designing activities for the online modules to ensure that effective teaching and therefore effective learning amongst the students will take place. So naturally, our students, who are our main customers, have to be satisfied. The degree of satisfaction or the factors that may affect their satisfaction level will come from whether they find the activities relevant, meaningful, useful, and that they have learned the concepts that are necessary for them to develop the competencies related to knowledge, skills, and developing the right attitude towards the subject or the course. Scale will refer to how the institution will provide an enabling environment. How much support will the administrators of an educational institution provide so that both the teachers and the students will have access, which is the fifth pillar here, to online education modalities. So remember these building blocks that provide support for successful online learning. When one of these pillars is not fully accomplished, there could be problems in the way we deliver online education. This brings me now to some of the characteristics or favorable practices related to online teaching. I'm giving these 6 a thumbs up rather. So online teaching is best practiced through asynchronous learning. Why asynchronous learning? Asynchronous learning enables the students, the learners, to study at their own pace, and so therefore they can become self-directed. Also, especially in the Philippines where internet connectivity is not that strong, asynchronous learning can be a more viable option than synchronous learning. Also, we have to remember that in online teaching, we have to specify the expectations. The students have to know what is expected of them. Remember that there is no face-to-face interaction, and so therefore the learning goals for every session has to be clearly and laid out, and set in the online learning modules or any other materials used for online teaching. We also have to remember that less is more. So we don't have to fill up every moment of our students' time in online teaching. Again, we have to remember that they are new, our students, just like us, are new to this modality. So we have to be sympathetic, otherwise we might make our students feel anxious, considering that they are entering into a new learning environment that they have not experienced before. So we have to seek also student feedback when we do online teaching. We have to know what they think, how they find the activities. We have to interact and communicate with our students frequently. This will give them a feeling of reassurance, and so therefore less anxiety, and therefore will lead to more engagement, more active participation in the online modules and other activities. We also have to provide through the different modules, activity sheets, and other aspects of our online teaching, explicit instructions, because we want our students to do their work independently, and so explicit instructions will guide them better into fulfilling the tasks that are expected of them. And as I mentioned earlier, consistent communication is a must in online teaching, so that in fact, this is one of the important things that we have to evaluate when we assess the online learning modules and the effectivity of these modules on our students and how it impacts our student. So online teaching is best when we do asynchronous learning, when we specify expectation and set learning goals, when we are empathic and sympathetic with our students' needs, when we seek their feedback, when we provide explicit instruction, and if there is consistent communication. So this brings me now to online learning modules. So these are the online learning modules. We can understand it better by taking into account what online learning means. No? Just to recall and to review, online learning is a way of delivering instruction using internet-based technologies. So this may come in the form of links, videos, activities, sheets, problem sets, or modules that are that may take place or may consist of, actually it's a learning platform that is usually 10 to 15 minutes. It has no more than 1 or 2 learning concepts, and it incorporates a blend of teaching and assessment tools. So it suggests that online learning modules are designed to cater to different types of learners and consider the different ways by which students learn. The components of online learning modules are the usual components of modules. No? So it usually has the following. No? Introduction. So, and in the introduction, the rationale and the objectives of the learning modules are specified. It has also a number of activities and activities that will enable the students to acquire the competencies in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitude. There are also exercises that will enable the learner to practice and apply the concepts that they have learned. Assignment can also be part of the online learning modules, which may come again in different forms depending on the concept and the skills that we intend our students to master. No? Assessment is also an important component of an online learning module. And this will enable us to measure and find out how much has the student learned in terms, again, of the knowledge, skills, and attitude, which are basically what we hope to measure and assess in keeping with the outcomes-based education. Reflection is also an important part of any module, especially with online learning modules. This will allow our students to reflect on their own learning and enable them to develop metacognitive skills and employ metacognitive strategies that have been found to be useful in promoting self-regulated learning. Feedback is another important component of online learning modules. The feedback can come in different forms depending on, of course, the age of our learners and the appropriateness relevant to the concept and the skills, as well as the attitude that we're trying to develop. And to guide the learners, modules have to provide additional resources, links, and other materials that students can use to better understand the lesson. In planning online learning materials, such as online learning modules, the universal design for learning is the framework that has been developed that incorporates the characteristics of digital platforms or digital learning environments and human, how the human brain works. So our online learning modules have to be guided by these principles. And this includes providing multiple means of engagement in order to develop purposeful and motivated learners. Our learning modules have to provide multiple means of representation of knowledge to develop resourceful and knowledgeable learners or knowledge-able learners. And thirdly, OLMs should provide multiple means of action and expression in order to develop strategic and goal-directed learners. I will go into the details of the UDL as I discuss it with the action research process in the later slides. So Morrison in 2015 introduced the 5 steps in assessing quality of online course and online course materials. The first step is to assess using a rubric, or our institutions may have other tools to consider the basic course elements, as usually module structures are advised, or given by our materials development offices, as well as the IT offices. And they usually have rubrics or other tools which we can consider in evaluating the basic course elements or the basic components of an online learning module. The second step is to analyze the course materials from the students' perspectives, because the students are the ones using the modules. Therefore, it's very important that we analyze the course materials, the online learning modules, from the students' perspectives. We have to find out how they assess the OLMs in terms of content, in terms of structure, in terms of user interface, among others. The third step is to assess course artifacts, course materials, and look at the feedbacks given by the students in as they perform the different activities provided in the online learning modules. The fourth step is analyzing the level or the type of interaction, because interaction is a very important element of successful online education. So we have to look at how the students interact with the teacher, both individually or in groups, and how the student interact with other students. So the level and type of interaction has to be analyzed. And the fifth step is to look at the results. And the results of any online course with online learning modules as the main source or resource, we have to look at evidences of students' learning. And if we look at evidences of students' learning, again, as I said, in keeping with the outcomes-based education, we have to look at the knowledge or the concepts that they have learned, they have understood, and they can apply, as well as the skills that have been developed in relation to the subject matter or the content, and the attitude, positive attitudes and values that were developed in the students. Another resource that we can use is the one provided by the Southern Regional Education Board from Atlanta, Georgia. The website is the www.sreb.org. In 2006, they developed a checklist for evaluating online courses. And we can get some items, or we can adopt some items in their checklist if we want to use them to have our students provide feedback on the online learning modules that they are using. In this particular checklist, the quality of online course materials are assessed in terms of the following. We have to assess the online learning materials in terms of the content standards. So we have to look at the curriculum, the curriculum standards for the particular subject in which the module is a part of. And then we also have to look at the clarity of goals and the objectives, whether they are SMART goals, and they are meaning specific, measurable, and we also have to look at how the students are assessed. So we have to look at the different ways by which students' knowledge, skills, and attitudes are manifested, are displayed through the different activities that are provided in the online learning module. And communication and interaction has to be evaluated also, because this will be very important in determining the quality of the OLMS. We also have to look at the strategies, the pedagogical strategies that were employed through the different activities in the module. And finally, we have to look at the resources provided and the materials that are used by the students in carrying out the different tasks and activities within the module. In 2003, GOOD provided ideas on how we can evaluate the quality, usability, and potential effectiveness of online learning modules. So he used these three constructs to evaluate OLMS, that we can look at the quality of online learning modules in terms of clarity of directions and conciseness of the directions, whether the content is properly sequenced, whether there's development of concepts and development of skills, and whether the module provide opportunities so students can practice the new concepts and the skills that they have learned, and the quality of the online learning modules also include providing feedback for the practice. The teachers provide feedback for the students so that they can be properly guided and monitored in terms of their achievement in relation to conceptual understanding, skills, mastery of skills, and development of the positive attitudes and values. Aside from quality, we can also evaluate online learning modules in terms of usability. So here, we have to look at the interface used in the online learning modules, whether the interface is easy to navigate. We also have to consider the navigational options that are always available for the user. We also have to look at the layout of the module, because the layout can be motivating for the learners if they are, for example, visually appealing. And fourth, we also have to look at lead time, whether sufficient lead time is provided for every activity in the module or for every task that are required by the student as part of the module. So all of these cover the aspect of usability. Thirdly, we can also evaluate the potential effectiveness of our modules as a teaching tool. So when we say potential effectiveness, this will require looking at whether the learning objectives are clear and concise, no? Similar to quality. And then we also have to look at the module, whether it identifies prerequisite knowledge and whether the activities are timely and feedbacks are relevant and timely. No? Immediate feedbacks is preferred. And we also have to look at whether the module builds on prior knowledge. In this way, we can then say that the online learning module has a potential effectiveness as a teaching tool. Good 2003 also provided survey questions, which are in a 4-point Likert scale, which you can adopt in case you want to apply a questionnaire in getting feedback from your students in terms of the module's quality, usability, and potential effectiveness as a teaching tool. So maybe the next thing that I'd like to talk about is why action research? Why do we have to use action research as a means of evaluating online learning modules? First, we have to understand what action research is. For some of you who are already familiar, let me remind you that action research is unique as a research paradigm because it is a very personal research paradigm. It involves the teacher as the researcher. It also involves the researcher looking at his or her own practices and trying to improve his or her own practices to become a more competent and a more committed, dedicated educator, professional educator. Here are some of the reasons, and because of this, I've listed some of the reasons why we have to use action research as a paradigm in evaluating our online learning modules. Given the characteristics of action research, we have to understand that action research can be a potential way or mechanism by which we can improve the quality of education. Firstly, through action research, we can look at different opportunities to reflect on and assess our practices. At this particular point, I'm talking about your development and design of online learning modules is part of your practice. So through action research, you can reflect and assess the online learning modules that you have created. Action research will also allow you to explore and test new ideas, new methods, and new materials. Again, in this case, the new materials are the online learning modules that you have developed, the ideas, your pedagogical strategies and methods that you have incorporated in the module through the different activities can also be evaluated. So, through action research, you can assess the effectivity of new approaches and materials. And therefore, you can make wiser decisions about which new approaches, which among the activities that you have included in the module, which among the assessment tools you have included in the module, which among the videos and other resources can be included in the next stage of practice or in the next year that you will be using the module with your students. And through action research, we can share feedback with our colleagues and our stakeholders, such as our students and their parents, in terms of how the online learning modules can contribute to better learning. So these are some of the reasons why action research is a suitable or appropriate paradigm in evaluating online learning modules. Here are some of the key characteristics of action research. Action research involves the study of educator researchers' own practices. And as you were the ones who have developed and designed the online learning modules, then it is imperative that you evaluate, implement, and then evaluate these online learning materials. I have always used the analogy of taking a selfie, with this primary characteristic of action research as a study of educator researchers' own practices. In other research designs, you study about other people. But in action research, you study about yourself, your professional practice. So similarly, it's like taking a selfie. You turn the lens on you. This time, when you evaluate the learning modules, you turn the lens on the utilization of the learning modules and all aspects that go with it. So since the online learning modules were designed by you, the educator researcher, therefore action research is a very appropriate paradigm to evaluate the OLMs. Action research also has practical focus. So as I said, action research is self-reflective. You turn the lens on your own educational practices. In this case, that particular practice is the design and develop online learning modules. It has practical focus because it has immediate benefits for the teachers. Through the analysis of the quality, usability, and potential effectiveness of online learning modules, it can surely provide immediate benefits for the teacher researcher and the students, and which will be manifested also through the optimum learning among the students. It will have immediate benefits for the schools and in the community, where the school is considered as an agent of change in the community. Another characteristic of action research is that it involves partnership and collaboration. So the teacher researcher developed the online learning modules, but the success, the effectiveness, the quality of the OLMs are going to be gauged when the students start utilizing the modules. And since the students will be at home, the parents will play an important role in supporting and providing support to the students while studying at home. So there's partnership and collaboration, which is again an important characteristic of action research. The action researcher develops a plan of action. And that's what you did when you developed or designed your online learning modules. So, and you can use the action plan as a means of assessing the establishment of a pilot program in your school. A part of this pilot program can be the online learning modules that you have designed, that teachers have designed or developed. And you are going to explore and evaluate new practices. So a plan of action is needed for you to look at the new normal, which is in the form of online learning modules that you have developed for your students. This is the brief description of action research as a process. Action research is emergent, meaning the action researcher understanding about the process takes shape as the research progresses. It's also an iterative process, and this allows converging towards a better understanding of what is happening because of the repeated actions, which take in the form of planning, doing, studying, and acting in different cycles. As you can see from the figure, we can start, for example, in the planning stage, you have envisioned success amongst your students in terms of learning through the online learning modules. And so you develop a plan of action in the design of the module. And then you implement and collect, of course, you collect data from the literature that will help you plan the online learning module. And then you analyze the data and form your conclusions. And then you adjust your implementation theory and begin again, report the results based on the data, and then again, envision success. So action research is iterative, repetitive, and it's also participative. The idea is that since action research leads to action and the action in the research leads to change, change is usually easier to achieve when those affected by the change are involved in the process. So let me now go to the model that I would like you to consider when you evaluate your online learning module. So the model is called PDSA, or short for plan, do, study, and act. Okay. So in the planning stage, you can, basically it addresses the question, how did I design the module? How did I design it? What are the things that I considered? How did I develop the different components of the module? Then this will lead you to the do stage. After you have designed the module, you are now going to implement the module come opening of classes. And that's basically saying, let's try it. Let's try the module. Let my students and myself as the teacher, as the guide, try the module that I have developed. And then while the students are using the module, while you're implementing the module to carry out your teaching in the online or platform, you proceed to understanding how was it. So that will lead you to the study part of the action research. And after looking at how was it during the actual implementation, you can now examine the results and think about how can the changes after the use of the module be sustained. So these are the 4 basic questions or statements associated with each of the steps in the action research PDSA cycle. Let me go to each of these steps. So plan, how did I design it? So here, you have to define the standards. You have first, before you develop the online learning module, I understand that you have to define the standards. You have to find out, you have to examine the curriculum for the particular module, and then describe the plan for instruction, describe the module, the different components, the design, etc. You are going to assess what has been happening prior to the use of in the previous years when there were no online learning modules. How did you teach in the old normal, which is face-to-face? And then in the design of the module, you also have to be guided by the UDL principles. You have to pay particular attention to the goals, the instructional strategies, the materials, and the assessment tools. So in planning online lessons, this is where you use the universal design for learning. So the first aspect is providing multiple means of engagement. So this involves basically thinking about how learners will engage with the lesson. So we have to look at the lesson, whether it provides options that can help all learners regulate their own learning, sustain effort, and motivation. Remember that the online platform may be something very new to most of our students. And the pandemic has forced them to consider this as the new normal. Therefore, their motivation towards the use of the module and the platform, the learning platform, has to be sustained. The lesson also has to provide options that can help all learners become engaged and be interested with the lesson. So next, this basically covers the why of learning. Next is to make sure that online learning modules provide multiple means of representation, which basically covers the what of learning. It involves thinking about how the information is presented to the learners. Remember that the modules, the online learning modules and other materials provide information that can help the learners reach higher levels of comprehension and understanding, understand the symbols and expressions of the information that will lead them to form new knowledge, make meaning, and form concepts. Also, the information must provide options that can help the learners perceive what needs to be learned. And as I said, this basically covers the what of learning. The third is providing multiple means of action and expression. So the online learning modules must also cover the how of learning. So in planning online lessons, we have to think about how learners are expected to act strategically and express themselves, manifest their understanding, manifest their learning, show their learning. So the activities in the module should provide options that can help learners act strategically, express themselves fluently using the different means of knowledge representation, and finally, to physically respond. So the universal design for learning principles, if used as a guideline when you were preparing your online learning modules, in the same manner, you can, therefore, you can use it in describing the plan stage in the PDSA cycle. You can also use some of the, if you want to know whether the modules are aligned with the universal design for learning principles, we can develop some checklists maybe, or survey questionnaire that students can respond to. But it has to be stated in a language appropriate to their age and grade level. Now, the second stage of the PDSA is the do stage. So this is now the try out stage, where the students and the teacher will now carry out the action plan that is inherent in the design and developed in the design and in the developed module. So at this stage, the action researcher must describe how the online module was utilized. So we have to look at the different activities, learning experiences, and links, videos, and whatever learning resources were used in the module, and how they were carried out, and how the students find those activities relative to their learning of the concepts, their mastery of the skills, and their acquisition of values and attitudes towards learning. The third, so after you have implemented, you will now study the effects or the impacts on the learners of the module that they have used. No? So basically addressing the question, how was it? No? So the results here that I'm referring to that you have to study are evidences of improvement amongst the learners, because the main purpose of the online learning modules is to make sure that our students learn, no, the knowledge, skills, and attitude expected so that they can develop the competencies required for their grade level. So we have to look at whether the changes that have occurred in your planning for instruction, which is basically the online learning module, have impacted the students, and that you can examine the different evidences of improvement by using the way they have performed the tasks, the activities, and the way they have responded to the assessment tools that are incorporated in the module. So all of these will describe, all of this will be studied. No? Again, I can refer to the three aspects that were earlier pointed out by Good, no? Or postulated by Good. You can look at the module in terms of quality, in terms of usability, and in terms of potential as a teaching resource. And finally, the fourth stage, how can you sustain the change? How can we sustain the change that is brought about by the online learning module? And this requires both reflection coming from the teacher researcher and reflection from the students. Allow the students to reflect whether the module has indeed helped them become a more effective and efficient learner, and whether the instructional planning of the teacher has changed due to the feedback coming from both the parents and the students in terms of how the module has benefited them, and address also at this stage the question, how have these changes impact the students' learning? Because if the changes after the use of the online learning modules have led to significant improvements in the students' understanding of concepts, mastery of skills, and the students' acquisition of the necessary values, and positive attitude towards learning, this will suggest that the online learning modules is of good quality and therefore can be used and has the potential to be an effective means of ensuring optimal learning among the students. So, to summarize, using the PDSA model in analyzing and in evaluating online learning modules include 4 basic steps. Looking at the plan stage, how did I design the module? Considering the standards, describing the plan for instruction, and describing the module. And this is followed by the do stage, where you actually try and implement the module, carry out the action plan, and utilize the e-modules. And of course, in the study part, how was it? We have to look at the different components of the module and examine evidences of improvement among our students in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitude, and whether the changes have been significant and positive, as it will have an impact also in the teacher's planning for instruction. And in the act stage, how can we sustain the positive changes? So we have to look at how instructional planning of the teacher researcher has changed and how these changes have impacted students' learning. So as you can see, the action research PDSA model is a very appropriate framework for evaluating online learning modules. When you report or when you write the report of your evaluation, this can be a good way by which you can publish the results of your findings so that others may learn from your experience in the use of online learning materials or online learning modules. No? It is important that when you conduct research, you share or disseminate the findings. So let me just remind you at this point the quality criteria for educational action research in case you want to submit it for consideration for publication or presentation in research conference. You have to articulate the objectives of the action research clearly in your paper. There has to be action elements and change elements, that the action led to the change. Reflexivity or reflection as a process have to be discussed thoroughly in the entire action research for both the teacher researcher and the students in the case of your evaluation of online learning modules, as well as the parents, which also leads me to the discussion of how partnership and participation is manifested in your educational action research report, and the clarity of the methods and processes that you use in, for example, delivery of your online learning modules and your evaluation of online learning modules, and the significance of your study, as well as the contribution of your study or your evaluation to educational theory and practice. All of these can be reflected well if you, when you follow the procedure for the PDSA model using the action research paradigm. So I'd like to end my talk with two quotes that I found while I was trying to browse the internet about e-learning. And I'd like to start with the quote on the left, which came from an anonymous source. E-learning doesn't just happen. It requires careful planning and implementation. And another quote from an educator, online educator, Christopher Papas, and I quote, "When it comes to e-learning, content means everything. If e-learning content is not masterfully designed, all the rest will just go down the drain." At this point, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll be open to answering your questions regarding my talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the wonderful talk. Awesome, awesome. Okay, let's give Dr. Bing, okay, virtual clap. Okay, it's 11:12, and at this point, I encourage discussion and Q&A from the participants. Some of them have already sent their questions in the chat box. Let me just read some of them, okay? This is coming from Sherwin M. Okay, he raised, yes, very interesting questions. This is the question, Dr. Bing. If I will be the one who will develop the module and other teachers will implement it, can I use action research to study its effectiveness? Will it not defeat the self-reflective nature of action research? There are more questions, but that's the first question, Paul.
Okay. if you were the one who designed the modules, you can collaborate with other teachers because, for example, it may not be in your capacity or part of your duty to teach the classroom. Let's say you're an administrator or the department chair. You can do collaborative action research. Remember that collaboration is an important element of the action research process. So you can, it doesn't defeat the purpose because you are there as a curriculum designer, you are part of the action research team, and the rest of the team members can carry out what you have designed. In fact, it adds more validity because more objectivity because you will have other collaborators looking at the online module, the module that you have designed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bing. I hope, Sherwin, you heard that. There's another one from Sherwin again. What are the other best alternatives for online learning modules to cater those students who do not have access to internet and gadget?
Then as DepEd, what DepEd will be doing, if there is no online capability and there are no gadgets or infrastructure for the school to have online learning modules, then you can resort to the printed learning modules. At any rate, both online learning modules and printed modules will entail the same components. No? The difference is in the delivery of the modules.
Okay. Another question. Can we also apply the evaluation by Google 2003 to printed modules? How to address timely and relevant feedback for this kind of module?
There are many models or tools that you can use. I have cited some of them as possible means of evaluating your online learning modules. I have not come across the Google tool, but I'm sure you can find some degree of adaptability on your learning modules. No? Remember that when you evaluate the learning module, you have to evaluate in terms of quality, usability, and potential effectiveness as a teaching tool. So whichever rational or objective for your evaluation will be a determining factor in choosing the tool that you can use for assessing the quality of or evaluating the learning module.
Okay. Thank you po. From Billy Jack Passion, should we also mandate that the modules go through Turnitin or plagiarism software and grammar checker software?
That will be ideal because otherwise some of the activities may simply be copied. But if the teacher, the curriculum designers have undergone the proper training, they will know that there are copyrights that they need to consider, even in the use of pictures. So ethics in the design of curriculum materials have to be discussed so as to avoid those problems. But sure, you can use Turnitin if you are evaluating learning modules in your institution. And then after you have discovered that a significant part are simply copied, I think you have to advise the teacher, the curriculum designer, or the module designer to make the proper citations because I understand that if these different materials are used for teaching, there's no problem. As long as you don't use it for commercial purposes and that you don't claim that this activity or activities or materials were coming from your idea, as long as you make the proper citations.
Thank you, Dr. Ming. I encourage you to just type in your question in the chat box, so I just have to read them, okay? So that to facilitate the Q&A portion. Here's another one from Abigail Soliman. Should the module that I made need to be evaluated first? And then how many should evaluate it?
You mean validity of your module?
Yeah, probably.
Pilot testing, you have to pilot test it first. Maybe 10 students will be enough. No? The target students, you can pilot the module in terms of language, whether the language is easy to understand, it's appropriate to the level of the students in terms of grade level. And then after that, and then the complexity of the tasks and the assessment tools that are used. And then after that, you can subject it to experts' validation. The expert doesn't have to be, coming from the university. If you're working within a basic education institution, you can consider teachers who have been teaching the subject for a long time, say 5 years or more, may have the experience, the necessary experience for understanding the effective pedagogy. And so therefore you can request them to be part of the validators for your prior to actual implementation. As long as you consider the feedback coming from the validators and the students who were involved in the pilot testing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Bing. Here's another question from Alvin Insorio. How are we going to measure the effectiveness of online learning module if the module is ready-made from DepEd authorities and we cannot modify the content or layout? Very timely question.
If there's really nothing you can do, although I doubt it very much, because as I heard from the curriculum developers, these are just templates or lesson exemplars, module exemplars. I believe DepEd have designed these modules to help the teachers, but it's still the teacher in the classroom who decides which of these tasks can my students carry out, because you know your students better. Because the students in using the module have to experience success in terms of completion of tasks. So therefore, you may have to add some scaffolding tasks so that they can reach their potential, or they can reach the level of competencies expected in using the module. So even if DepEd provided you with a template, the entire module, you can add some more. And I think you can make certain changes that are applicable to your students.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Bing. From Raymond Ganowan, in order to examine improvement in learning, is a pre-test, post-test required, or are there other ways to examine improvement?
Of course, there are many ways. The best way is the formative tests, meaning you do not examine the test before the instruction, before the use of the module, and after the use of the module. You examine the changes in their understanding, in the skills, and in their attitude while they are learning. So the formative assessment tools are more important. Of course, the pre-test, post-test are also important, but to look at how they have learned, it's better to look at formative assessments. So not only are we looking at pencil paper tests, but it can be in the form of performance tasks that you will ask your students to do, like writing a critic paper or a reflective essay, or in mathematics, asking them to pose problems, not only solve problems, or do a particular group activity, or develop an infographic, or there are so many ways. Make sure that the assessment tools manifest their understanding, will allow the students to manifest their understanding and how they use the different information and knowledge they have gained through the module.
Okay.
In keeping with the universal design for learning principles that I discussed earlier.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bing. Here's another question from Mary Grace Rafael. Is there any available questionnaire for this assessing the students online, or you can give us? Thank you.
I have provided already some of the sources. I think I have shared yung South Region SREB. I have provided the website. It can easily be downloaded. It's actually in PDF form. And then what you can do is you adopt certain instruments. And of course, you just mention in your final report in the manuscript that you have adopted this instrument. I think Dr. Dita will provide you a PDF copy of my talk. So all the different possible tools that you can use are provided in particular slides during my talk.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bing. Dr. Bing is very generous. She sent us the PDF copy of her lecture, and I'll be posting the link later on in the chat box. So do not leave the meeting yet. I'll post everything. Here's another one from Rona Jane Liwanag. Aside from the evaluation tool in survey form and participant reflections, what other research tools can we use to do action research given the remote modality, if we want varied tools for triangulation purposes?
So for triangulation purposes, remember you must have at least 3 data sources. So in keeping with the action research principles, you have to follow the 3 E's. Experience by observation, inquiring by asking questions through interviews, focus group discussion, questionnaires, tests, and examining documents. So you can actually use these techniques. You can use focus group discussion by having conference meetings like this. So you can actually conduct focus group, and you can use the methodology cited, some of the methodologies cited by Professor Miller in an earlier webinar on action research methodologies. So not only do we rely on tests, we can also use questionnaires, we can use focus group discussion, you can use key informant interviews by holding meetings like this, digital meetings like this, which can turn into an interview, diba? Or you can use email as a resource. Or if you don't have the email, you can use, most of the Filipinos now have smartphones. So I think you can still communicate using chat, messages, Facebook. Filipinos are very fond of Facebook, at any age, all age groups. Okay, have I answered your question? I hope I did. Dr. Dita?
Yeah, okay. There are a lot of questions, Dr. Bing, but we have time anyway. And this is what I like about online, okay? So unlike conferences, we're only given 1 hour. Here in online lectures, you are given more than an hour. Okay, I'll read more questions. Oh, this one is coming from Dr. Ching Lim Hap. Okay, Dr. Bing,
Hi, Ching.
for attending our online conference. Let's welcome Dr. Ching Lim Hap. She's a figure when it comes to science ed as well. So here's the question. What about having the module you design evaluated by experts? What about having colleagues observe the implementation of your module? Is this part of collaborative action research, or this is individual action research with external evaluators? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chi.
In keeping with the action research principles, it is better to use the collaborative approach, because partnership and participation is inherent in action research. So the expert, who is usually the university expert, because they are the ones that are really into research, no? Unlike basic education teachers who rarely have the time to do research because of the tons of work that they have to do, no? But I think it is best if they are part of the research process as collaborators. Then each collaborator's idea is important, equally important in from the planning stage to the design, development, implementation, and evaluation of the module. So it has to be a collaborative, participatory kind of research. It becomes participatory if every member of the team is part from the planning stage. But in this case, if one develops the learning module, as in the case of DepEd, they have a team of experts who develop the module, and then they cascade it to the different schools, no? And give it to the teachers. Then the teachers become collaborators. But as I said, these are just exemplars, so the teachers can still modify. No? But I'd rather have it Ching as a collaborative action research.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bing. We have more questions. So if I happen not to pick your question, please type again at the end because I'm scrolling down in the chat box. This is from Dr. Earl Albina. How about the issue of copying of lectures like video clips and PowerPoint for the modules? Is there a percentage for similarities since this is for sharing and use for education?
As I earlier said, if the materials are used for education purposes, most of the designers wouldn't mind, as long as you cite, as long as you don't claim that it's yours. No?
Yeah.
It becomes plagiarism. But if you acknowledge that the PowerPoint is taken from the work of professor or whoever from this university, then that's fine. Because the professor will also appreciate. No? Usually when we download, you remember, when you go to digital platforms like PowerShow, PowerPoint presentation, SlideShare, there's usually a point where you leave a note to the developer, dear professor, whoever, I'd like to download your presentation because that's enough. That's what they need, no? A reason why are you interested with their work, no? Because if they are educators like us, they wouldn't mind as long as you don't gain anything monetarily out of it. But it's used for education purposes. It's good to share, no?
Yeah, that's right. In the APA 7, okay, this is how you are going to cite it. So the name of the author and then the title of the work. And then in square brackets, you just say online lectures or PowerPoint slides, okay? And you should be able to do it. Here's another question. As I understand in the early part of your talk, Dr. Bing, student learning will be more effective if they will be provided with good asynchronous activities. How much of asynchronous activities is ideal and OLM should have?
Maybe because there are certain tasks that have to be synchronous. The only digital in the literature, most of the educators are advocating asynchronous because of the differences in internet connectivity. It's more of the infrastructure more than anything else. And we do not make it like a disadvantage for our students if they cannot attend classes online. Even right now, when I'm conducting graduate classes, I experience that. Some of my students cannot come in because the rain is so heavy in their area. The internet connectivity is affected. So if it's asynchronous, the student can still work on it. So I believe what we're doing now here in La Salle is about 60% asynchronous and some are synchronous. But if there's full online capability, right now, what we're using at DLSU is 100% fully online. But
Yes.
in the case of certain problems on internet connectivity and other is this technological aspects, then maybe a 60% asynchronous will be useful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bing. We have more questions, Dr. Bing, huh? Okay. Anyway, we
Okay.
promise, yes. This is coming from Lester John Cajes. Institutions where QA tools for OLMs are not in place. Is it ethical or acceptable for the materials developer to craft or adapt his own tool and use it in his AR eventually?
It is best to follow standards. So I've shown you some standards you can benchmark with. Certain institutions follow yung quality matters, no? And other QA models for evaluating online modules. But then again, this may vary depending on the user of the modules. No? So we may have at some point develop our own assessment tools or evaluation tools that are suited for our learning modules, for the modules that we have designed. Just make sure that you incorporate the universal design principles, which is the framework for online learning materials, and then the standards of the grade level or the curriculum standards, and then of course the vision and mission of your institution.
Okay, thank you. Here's one from Roger Tejada. If I want to conduct an AR on offline learners and I'm using the module made by teachers, is pilot testing still needed?
Offline, can you repeat the question, Dr.
Yeah, if
Gita?
I want to conduct an action research on offline learners and I'm using the module made by teachers, is pilot testing still needed?
Yes. Any material, any learning material, teaching learning material, prior to implementation, if you want to be organized about it and to, be more mindful of the protocols, no? When you do a research, you really have to do pilot testing. This will ensure the usefulness and the effectiveness of the module or the material prior to its implementation.
Okay, thank you. I'm reading a question from Kent Hermie Marchalo, but I'm trying to recall if Jasper Alontaga already addressed this question. Can the learning analytics in LMS be used in finding out if there's a significant improvement in the academic performance or specific skills of our students? This is probably the analytics in, for example, Canvas or...
Yeah, of course you can. That's the feature of the learning management system. We're just talking about the OLMS, but remember that the online learning modules are embedded in learning management systems wherein certain LMS can provide analytics for the knowledge. No? And even there are certain softwares that can be used even for analyzing verbal data. No? Like EWP, expressive writing prompts. Like for example, you analyze reflection using expressive writing prompts. It's a software that can analyze students' responses in terms of reflection, the reflection part, a verbal data technique, which can also be part of or embedded in the learning management system.
I see. Hi, Dr. Aguha. Thank you. Thank you for participating. This is coming from Marlo Castillo.
Hi, Marlo.
Okay. Should the checklist of the learning modules be generic for a specific school, or it would be better if we can have varied checklists per grade level or per level brackets?
It is best if they are age appropriate and following the curriculum standards for the grade level. Although, with respect to the vision and mission of the school in terms of, let's say we have the Lasallian core values, no? So therefore we can use common instruments for that, no? But it's best that teachers develop their own assessment tools, checklists, for example. Because, for example, grade levels, I mean, and the age appropriateness is very important. You cannot require, for example, grade 1 students to just put a check. Maybe, based on the words described, but maybe they can look at the smiley, whether it's smiling, frowning, or whatever. It's the checklists are laid out and designed following the age and the grade level.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bing. This is coming from Luigi Valencia. Hi, hello, Dr. Prudente. May I ask how action research guarantee validity and reliability of evaluation of behavioral and psychomotor objectives?
For behavioral manifestations can be looked into. So you have, as I said earlier, there has to be smart objectives, no? Yung smart objectives in our modules, di ba? Yung the acronym SMART, yung measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, yun, di ba? Then we can have our results in action research reliable because we consider different data collection techniques, and we follow triangulation, and we follow the usual measures of validity in qualitative research like confirmability, no? And we make sure that we get the perspectives from different sources and from different members or stakeholders that are affected by the instruction or by the action research program. Okay, next question.
Some questions here, I forgot to unmute some questions here I think have already been answered by Dr. Bing, like if you want to adapt some sources, you can get it from the slides that she will be sharing with us. So yeah, here's another one from, ay, nasaan na yun? Okay, I'm looking at the questions. Here's another one from Grace Annette Soriano. Can you suggest a checklist or survey questionnaire to assess communication and interaction between students and the teacher and among students? I'm not sure if you've already answered that.
Yes, I can suggest, but I'd like to send me an email because one of my graduate students is doing a dissertation on that, particularly on teacher-student, student-student interaction in a digital learning environment. No? So just send me an email. I can share with you what we have done so far. No? I don't know if he's here. Jose Noel Fabia, one of my graduate students, is doing a dissertation on that regard. We can share it with you, but I can also recommend that you go online. And by the way, for the researchers, I suggest very strongly that you download the application Publish or Perish. So it provides you an easy access to seven platforms when you're searching for articles for your literature review. So send me an email. I'll share with you that particular.
Thank you, Dr. Andro Dayoha. In the PDSA model, you presented the UDL model for to be used for planning phase. Are there models for do phase, study phase, act phase?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
The entire model, the PDSA, is a process model. No? So I included the plan. In the plan, I would like to refer, kasi nasa evaluation na tayo, no? So wala na sa planning. But I'd like to think that when you planned or designed your module, you follow the UDL principles. Basically, yun lang yung framework ng UDL. And then, of course, isasama mo, you are going to include the principles, the curriculum standards for the content and the curriculum standards based on your institution's mission and vision, no? And program standards as well. So, and you follow the outcomes-based education principles. In the do stage, you follow, of course, there are different models depending on the type of module that you have created, the rationale, the objectives of the module, whether the module aims to develop understanding of concepts or develop certain skills or enable the student to acquire a particular value or attitude. So there is no singular model that can explain, that can make you do the, do stage. No, it depends on the kind of module that you have planned. So it starts with the plan, because the do stage is just carrying out the plan. And then the study stage is just like similar to the results and discussion in a thesis. You study the results of the implementation. So it basically involves using varied forms of data, looking for evidences of changes or improvements among the learners. Because this will be the prime indicator that the modules are effective, that the modules are following, no, or in accordance with how it was planned and how it was used and the changes that are expected from the learners who have used the module. And the act stage is simply standardizing the improvement. So making you see whether reflecting on the changes that have occurred and allowing you to plan for the next cycle, seeing that action research is iterative. Now, we do not stop at just finding out after first year of implementing the module. No? We prepare for the next year and make sure that the module is now better, no? For our students, for the benefit of our students, because we have seen the weaknesses, and so we have to translate those weaknesses and convert them into strengths, no? To ensure that we will have a better module for our students.
Here is coming from Ray Medjanilia. How do we regard the difference of the impact of the same OLM when implemented through blended learning?
Now, remember that strictly, online learning modules are brief. No? They have to be within 10 to 15 minutes of use. So they can easily be embedded in any digital platform, or can be part of the entire course platform, digital platform. So I see no, how do you call it, conflict in the use of learning modules. Diba? Kasi it's, okay.
This is coming from Nits Kalayag.
Hi, Nits.
Oh, okay. If I will be doing a module for a graduate course, how should it be different from the module for undergraduate course?
Oh, very different. Firstly, because you're dealing with adult learners who are more self-directed. So you're not going to apply pedagogical principles. You're going to apply andragogical principles. there are the teaching and learning among adults is different from the teaching learning for the youth, no? So graduate students are adult learners. So you apply andragogical principles. You will have less problem because they are already self-directed. They are motivated to learn. They're purposeful. So in fact, their attention span is much longer. I find it in my conduct of graduate classes. I can go online for 3 hours. They don't mind. But of course, you don't do that with undergraduates, more so with your elementary and high school students. They easily get bored. So I just had a training with faculty members of one of our Lasallian schools in the basic education. And they were telling me that one of their problems in their online classes is that students refuse to switch on their cameras. So you don't really see what they're doing. So you require that, huh? So that you can see what they're doing. Switch on their cameras. It's part of, so that you'll still have face-to-face interaction kahit na virtual, at least, no? When the students see the teacher, there is some degree of reassurance, no? That is involved. So it enhances and encourages and motivates them to be more participative, more engaged in the discussion. But remember to use andragogical principles. Give them choices, the usual. The principles involved in adult learning.
Yes. Okay. We are running out of time. So at this point, Dr. Bing, we might want to tell them as early as now about our plan of launching ARAL journal, because in the chat box there were like invitations to publish, okay, and there were links. And thank you for those who provided links to possible publication of action research articles, okay. But the leader is also planning to launch this year the Action Research, Action Learning Journal, or ARAL Journal. Since we already have annual ARAL Congress, so we are launching ARAL Journal, and soon the ARAL Society. So don't forget, we have ARAL Congress that has already been established, and now we are establishing ARAL Society. That's ARAL S, and then ARAL J, or ARAL Journal. So watch out for the launching of those. And of course, Dr. Bing is the editor-in-chief of ARAL Journal. We have already done initial planning of that one. We will announce soon the developments of this plan, okay? But for sure, if we have the ARAL 2021, I mean by next year, we will be launching the ARAL Society, where you can be members, and we're planning to have, of course, representative per region. So yeah, those are the projects in the pipeline.